Welcome to Capitol View, the show where State House observers discuss the week that was. And what a week it was. Longtime House Speaker Mike Madigan is out of power after 4 decades, and President Donald Trump is impeached again. With us to discuss is Kent Redfield, Professor Emeritus of Political Science at the University of Illinois Springfield. Thanks for being here, Kent.
Good to be here.
Jerry Nowicki, Bureau Chief at Capitol News, Illinois. Thanks for joining us.
For having me.
Jerry, I'll start with you. I think we're going to be processing this week for a very long time. I think, 6 months ago, none of us would have ever imagined that Speaker Mike Madigan would be out of power. A man who has lasted through 9 governors. Yesterday, on Wednesday, when Speaker Madigan became merely Representative Mike Madigan again, for the first time in years and years and years. He was celebrating the 50th anniversary of him actually taking the oath of office to the Illinois House for the first time. But then this summer, we saw, the political world kind of turned upside down because, the federal prosecutors filed this deferred prosecution agreement against Commonwealth Edison, basically alleging a years-long scheme of bribery to benefit the speaker. So, kind of bring me this last 6 months, and especially the last, few weeks that led to this. How much of a surprise do you think it came to everyone that it finally shook out the way it did? And now we have a new speaker, Chris Welch, the first Black House Speaker in Illinois history, which is, history making in its own right. So bring us up to speed. How surprising is this development?
Yeah. So no matter how many, breadcrumbs we got in the last couple of months of the various representatives peeling off their support, I think collectively, we as a media pegged it around 19 when this started. There were 19 representatives who said they wouldn't vote for Madigan. That put him we expected about 55 whatever votes for him as speaker. But then the first ballot came and it was a little bit less than that, according to people in the building. And it just, as the days went on, it's like, oh, this might actually happen, even though we sort of, for a couple weeks, we thought, this looks like it may happen. There's always that sort of tendency to never count Madigan out because of his 3+ decades as speaker. So for me, just sitting there at the Bank of Springfield Center, I was cognizant of the historic moment I was witnessing, and just the sheer fact. And it's not even that. We'll talk about this in depth a little bit later, but the number of massive, transformative is a word we've all been using several times, transformative pieces of legislation that passed leading up to that. And all those bills were backed by the Black Caucus. And then the Black Caucus support is what sort of gave the bedrock to Welch's campaign for speaker, that, he says he had no plans to become speaker. We'll take his word for it. I don't know if he came down here thinking I'm going to be speaker, whatever, but it was a historic week for the Black Caucus. They got a lot of stuff done, and now they have, among their members is the Speaker of the Illinois House that has been Mike Madigan for my entire life, except for a couple years in the 90s.
Right, exactly. And, it's the Black Caucus became, very powerful and influential over years and years and years because of alliances with Speaker Madigan. And he also, one of the less sexy things that he did, but was very, very good at, was controlling the legislative map-making process. And here we are in 2021, the year after a census. And there is another map-making process that will take place, through this spring and possibly summer. But Ken, walk me through, for someone like the speaker who, kind of his whole thing is longevity, for him to finally leave like this, it creates quite a power vacuum. There's no way that someone could come in a Speaker Welch could come in and then immediately fill that power vacuum. So what do you think, how do you think people will want to fill it, if not with one man? Because, clearly the one man in power thing that created quite a narrative for opposition to run with over and over and over again.
Well, but it, certainly the key issue was the consolidation of power combined with the fact that a lot of Democrats thought that the speaker's ethical problems were hurting their brand. Now, they only ended up losing one House seat and picked up one Senate seat in the last election. But there was certainly a feeling that the Fire Madigan kind of campaign that's been going on since the Rauner years was starting to catch hold. Now, the speaker calls members individually and talks to them about whether they're going to support him. And so, I think it was, probably obvious to him that he had a real problem if the 19 people were going to, whatever the number was, were going to create a stalemate. And so, him withdrawing his candidacy was either a graceful way to get out, or it was a Hail Mary in terms of, okay, I can't get to 60, see if anybody else can come to 60, maybe you'll come back to me if you can't pull all of these different factions together. What Madigan did was to build power out of the office of the speaker, really starting when he was, unlikely to become mayor of Chicago back in the late 70s, and was the majority leader of the House. And so it's not just the office of the speaker, it's the control of the speaker's office over the rules and procedures. It's the control of the speaker's office over all of the resources, all of the staff, the people that staff the committees, and it's also the lack of resources, both policy and staff, that individual members have, and then the control over the Democratic Party, which that happened in the late 80s, and so you don't expect Welch to come in and he's not going to be party chairman. And what will this mean for individual members? You don't know what agreements are there. Will there be more resources? Will the rules be loosened up? This could make a huge difference for rank and file members, or it could make no difference at all, other than, we've got a new boss and the institution doesn't change. So there's a tremendous amount of uncertainty going forward. Madigan is gone. This is the first African-American speaker. These are tremendous, huge changes. But, what this means for, the process and for the individual rank and file member, this will take a while to sort out. There's opportunity there, but that doesn't mean that this is going to be, that it's going to filter down to all of the things that constituted the basis of Madigan's power.
Right, definitely a seismic shift. But Jerry, I took some time to try to compare and contrast what the speaker was known for and then what a Speaker Welch says he might do, or the individual things that he faces. So, for example, when he was asked on Wednesday, how long is an appropriate term for a House Speaker, right away, without hesitation, he said 10 years, and would not be opposed to actually passing a law to make that so. And, he also, this Madigan was, often dogged by this, of lots of calls of, corruption. But one, actual tangible thing was he never gave up his name partnership in Madigan and Getzendanner, one of the premier real estate tax appeals firms in the city of Chicago. And the argument there is, he is the one who is in charge of legislation that affects directly or indirectly property taxes. And, when Welch was asked yesterday, he said he had already had conversations about leaving his own firm. He's a partner at a firm in the city, and he focuses on civil rights issues. But definitely some differences there, and just, they have, though, different types of baggage. Well, Welch has young children, and I kind of noted tongue-in-cheek in my story, maybe a little too proud of myself, but his young children, maybe their only political ambitions right now would probably be like, local school, be on the student council of their school. But Madigan, for a long time, his daughter Lisa Madigan was attorney general, and before that in the Illinois Senate. And for a time there, everyone thought she was going to run for governor. And then ultimately she said she couldn't run for governor as long as her father remained House Speaker. And so, but, you might trade one set of issues. Obviously, this cloud of federal corruption, we should say the Speaker has not been charged with anything. But that's one cloud. But then Welch, his past is not squeaky clean necessarily. I mean, we saw it wasn't necessarily new news, but it may have been to a lot of people. Media reports of a police report from 20 so years ago of an ex-girlfriend, reporting domestic violence, and then some other lawsuits. So, Jerry, do you think this Welch was asked to further explain that, and he kind of declined? Do you think that that's going to be a huge issue going forward? That's going to continue to, so we're trading one set of issues for another in our baggage of a House Speaker?
Yeah, I think Representative Kelly Cassidy put out a statement saying, I've known and respect Welch as a colleague, and I think he's a good man. But, she's been outspoken in defense of other women who have been subject to that level of domestic violence or something, and she's been outspoken in defense of them. And she said, we need a rigorous sort of look into Welch's past in this area, and he sort of has to answer to that. Her long statement, she was sort of, just saying that she's hopeful he could be successful, and you got to diversify leadership. But these are major things that we need to look at as a state and as a legislative body. So then Welch's statement is, of course, this woman is now a constituent of mine. We reconciled. Yeah, I think the way he worded it, the way this was worded, they said they went to the authorities together. I don't know what that means, but he didn't really explain it when asked about it. He said that's as far as I need to say on that. But he also says my record in the General Assembly shows that I speak, that I respect women. And long story short of it, I think there is some level of that's going to be chasing him as long as he's Speaker. I don't know if it would take the woman from the incident coming public. I'm not suggesting that should happen at all, but I think this Speaker Welch had said, I'm respectful of her privacy. So I don't know. I really don't know how that's going to play out. But you also have the political ramifications sort of between he and Leader Durkin, which I think will be interesting to watch play out too after Welch was on the committee investigating Speaker Madigan. So there's all sorts of dynamics, I think, that we'll have to watch. This is just so new for all of us, and it's just an interesting time right now, certainly.
Right. I mean, even though Speaker Madigan's gone. I mean, he remains a state representative. Not sure if he'll, how long he'll stay, if he'll stay.
As of the time of this taping.
Yes. He was sworn in and referred to as Representative Madigan, like I said at the top of the show, something he hasn't been known as since, early 1983. But, like you mentioned, the Special Investigating Committee, which Republican House Leader Jim Durkin had requested be open, I think it was like end of August, it was supposed to have, investigated whether Madigan did anything untoward as a legislator. But, essentially what happened is Welch, as the chairman of that committee, kind of blocked Madigan from having to testify or answer for anything. So, Kent, Leader Durkin took the opportunity on Wednesday to, to denounce that. And he kind of spoke out of, I felt, both sides of the mouth. He said, I'm ready to turn the page on this. However, he was still, he gave a pretty blustery speech on the makeshift House floor of the Bank of Springfield Center, denouncing Madigan for kind of maybe the last time, or I doubt it's the last time, but, what does that mean that Madigan is gone, but not really gone, Kent?
Well, in terms of relationships between the Democrats and the Republicans, obviously it's going to be acrimonious. I don't expect Welch and Durkin to become, good buddies all of a sudden. The Republicans are in a very difficult situation. They have 44 members to 70, or 45 members to 73. They only have 18 out of 59 Republicans in the Senate. The Republicans are pretty irrelevant if the Democrats are united, and so the hook has been Madigan in terms of why you shouldn't vote for the Democrats. The state has plenty of problems. There are plenty of issues to run on 2 years from now. There's absolutely no question, but it's really hard to let go. In terms of you've been hammering on a theme and not really making, even though you can say, well, they got a stalemate out of the last election, and so there's a lot of frustration on the part of the Republicans. I just quickly, you would say in terms of how is Welch different from Madigan? Madigan came to power as a protege of Richard J. Daley. He was part of the regular organization machine within the city of Chicago. He's an old style Illinois politician, which is about politics is about relationships and trust and, advantage, power. It's very pragmatic. Welch comes from an entirely different era, an entirely different background, and coming up through, local school board, having the support of the Black Caucus rather than, the regular organization Democratic Party of Cook County that would always deliver, unanimous votes and support for candidates. And so, it's a different era and a different style of politics. And so, that's going to be, insofar as Madigan was able to maintain that way that he approached politics, that is going to be gone, and we'll see what kind of vacuum we get. But certainly, they come from very, very different places in terms of their political experiences.
Right. And in the 7 or so minutes we have left, I do want to get to, the Black Caucus's historic agenda that they passed, but also the president's second impeachment. So, Jerry, I'll ask you, give me, run through what the Black Caucus was able to accomplish in, the 5 short days of lame duck session, and what ramifications that might have in the future for Democrats, for the Black Caucus, and kind of the ire it drove too, especially from policing needs.
Sure. So they had a 4-pillar legislative agenda focusing on healthcare, education, human services, and then obviously the criminal justice. I think there was one more. They passed essentially. Yeah, so there were at least 4 major bills, but some of them were in multiple bills. this stuff passed rapid fire. There were some amendments to it. I think the healthcare one initially was going to phase out managed care. I think that's removed now. So a lot of this stuff was sort of not muted, but some provisions taken out. And then criminal justice, you have, of course, getting rid of cash bail by 2023 was a big one. And then there's some requirements regarding use of force, and then the Attorney General's decertification of lawmakers. I think that's going to create some databases so you can search where maybe there have been misconduct complaints or investigations of an officer. I think that some of those details are in these bills that, that one came to the floor at 3 a.m. Or came into an amendment at 3 a.m., was voted on 4 a.m., 5 a.m., whatever it was. There was really, I think I can speak for you as well, Hannah, when we're going to be really ironing out the details of these for a couple days to come, just making sure we have everything right, making sure we know every provision that was removed from these bills. So I will say from a process perspective, I think it gives credence to some of the Republican arguments that, this is why you can't trust Illinois government. This type of stuff happens while you're sleeping. That's not speaking to anything directly in the bills, but they're going to really change some things about Illinois government. And I think we're just going to have to observe as these reforms are implemented and they play out.
Right. I mean, like you said, it always gives ammo when you were able to say middle of the night. I mean, Republicans for the last decade, since that 2011 lame duck income tax hike increase, they've been able to say, oh, they snuck it in the middle of the night. But Ken, I do want to move on finally to the president, his second impeachment. Illinois Republicans, like you said earlier, at least on the state level, I don't like to use the word irrelevant, but in the grand scheme of things, they are not the one in power. But what does it mean that, only one of Illinois' Republican, representatives in Congress voted to impeach on Wednesday? And what does that mean also just going forward for the Republican Party, and what even folks at the state level who might consider themselves moderate will have to answer to?
Well, it is part of the brand in terms of the Republican base. There's absolutely no problem, no question about that. And so this can have implications for primaries as we sort out, the Republicans are basically downstate. Ketzinger's district is the northernmost district. We probably will lose a congressional seat. We could have nasty primaries in terms of how that sorts out. If the primary for governor is a fight between the pro-Trump and the anti-Trump factions of the Democratic Party. You reprise, kind of Bruce Rauner versus Jeannie Ives before the general election when Pritzker was elected. And so until they sort out kind of who they are and how they're going to deal with the Trump supporters, which are a huge part of their base, it makes it difficult for them to go forward in terms of running in a state where it's very difficult for them to elect someone statewide. It's very difficult because of the redistricting dynamics for them to really pick up seats. They pick up seats in Southern Illinois and they lose them in the suburbs. Southern Illinois is shrinking in population. The suburbs are growing. So they really don't need a nasty inter-party fight over the soul of the Republican Party if they're going to be effective in terms of gaining ground in Illinois.
But we have already seen that play out over the last, year or so, or excuse me, not year, but several years. I think the Rauner years really did make a difference in terms of Rauner was, I would qualify him as a libertarian, but then he went and signed that abortion bill, HB 40, and angered all the conservatives, and they never really figured that out. And obviously on the national level, they haven't figured that out. And also in the Democratic Party, on both sides, like, they need to figure out how to prioritize, or like how to work together, the progressives and the, moderates. But I don't know. Historians will say that we never really had a true two-party system, and it's always been more of a four-party system. And I do wonder sometimes if we're ever going to make that kind of official. But anyway, we are out of time. Thank you so much, Kent Redfield, Jerry Nowicki, for joining me today on this very historic, weird week that we're going to be processing for a long time. But glad to see you guys, albeit virtually.